Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Bermuda Championship Data Dive Show. I have one announcement. Last night I mentioned that a Twitch viewer, James, had won a big contest over on DraftKings this weekend on the Showdown. I had another regular made a comment and a post that they had won or at least cashed in 80% of their lineups this weekend. So Joanne, congratulations. That is a major accomplishment. I am very happy to hear that, hoping that I provided something, anything that led you to that amount of success. So again, congratulations. I love to hear when viewers of the channel have success. So please, if you do have any outright winners, successful DFS weekends, let me know via social media, via the comments, Discord, any way that you can get a hold of me. Let me know. I would love to be able to let the community know the success of their fellow viewers. So again, James and Joanne, congratulations on a very successful weekend from the CJ Cup. We are going to be digging into quite a bit of data, scrutinize heavily the former or prior leaderboards. Twitch chat, or at least Twitch today, was pretty active in the sense that we were looking at the pattern of winners from the 3 prior years here at Port Royal. Found some interesting stuff. Be sure to give me a follow at the link in the description for Twitter. Unfortunately, I had to try to condense that research into 140 characters. Was not easy. I had quite a long-winded explanation of the research over on Instagram. So make sure you give me a follow at those 2 places if you ever want to see that research. But let's get into more of what we're trying to get into this week. So, all statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there, best bang for your buck. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler and a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It's well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. I mentioned Twitter and Instagram. This is where I place the research that I do throughout the week regarding winners. I also post my betting cards to Twitter. I will do that Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics shows. Discord server is another way you can get a hold of me. And then Twitch is where I am live every morning, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. A wide variety of topics. Again, today we went through the prior leaderboards, try to find some patterns for the former winners. We took a look at my mixed condition model from last week for the CJ Cup, see how that ended up performing, giving it a final critique. And then tomorrow I will be doing the rookie rankings, making that mixed condition model and preparing that info for you all for Wednesday. So if you want to see that show or that stream live, see that research, be a part of it, give me a follow at Twitch, and then join me at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Even if you aren't able to join in chat, just give me a follow. You can listen to it as you are working or going on about your day. A lot of good stuff there. Much more laid back, have a little bit of music in the background, much more interactive, all of that stuff. So hope you consider giving me a follow there. And then finally, we are live. Chat is open. How much have you looked at the odds today that came out this morning? As soon as the DraftKings Sportsbook odds came out, I fired off quite a few bets, quite a few wagers, did a couple of those on stream, and talking about why I felt pretty good about them. So what kind of wagers have you made? Have you looked at the pricing? Any early leans for pivots and fades? All of that good stuff. Jump in chat. Would love the interaction. But let's do what we're here for. Let's dig into the data for the 2023 Bermuda Championship. And we're going to start right off the gates in Fantasy National. Again, no tournament fact sheet, not a surprise. The course is not on continental U.S. soil, and we've got a lot to cover. We're going to try to scrutinize as much of those prior 3 years as possible, those prior leaderboards. So let's do a quick review, and then we'll get into what I think are going to be the very pertinent metrics and filters that we're going to want to look at this week. I do not have Windfinder up. I haven't looked at it today. I will update myself tomorrow as I'm doing the rookie rankings and then preparing my mixed condition model. Wind is definitely going to be a factor, so let's go ahead and start there. We're going to look at moderate and windy conditions. Going to set this for January 1st to get enough rounds, stable info for all of the players, or the majority of them. And before I forget, there has been one more field change. Peter Malnati has withdrawn. So I will try to remember if we come across his name tonight. There are now 4 players that have withdrawn. Your top 10 players in the wind since January 1st of 2022 have been Scott Piercy, Brandon Wu, Cameron Percy, Alex Smalley, Adam Long, Thomas Detry, Patrick Rogers, Ryan Armour, Justin Lauer, Nate Lashley, Kevin Yu, and Ben Griffin. Some of these rankings will slightly change. The CJ Cup has now been loaded into Fantasy National. But wind is absolutely going to be a factor this week. It normally is for the Bermuda Championship. So there are your top performers in the wind. I'm going to remove that filter. Let's go ahead and take a look at short courses. This course is under 7,000 yards. Very, very short. We'll play a little bit longer just because of the wind and such. But yardage-wise, not very long. Most of the par 4s here are from 350 to 400 yards. None of the par 5s approach 600 yards. So very short course. So on short courses, defined as less than 7,200 yards per Fantasy National. Your top performers since the start of this calendar year have been Seamus Power, Ryan Armour, Denny McCarthy, Eric Van Rooyen, Ben Griffin, Nick Taylor, Sean O'Hare, Patrick Rogers, Sam Ryder, and Vaughn Taylor. So, good stuff here. We mentioned how there was some overlap between short courses and wind last night. Patrick Rogers is one of those names that has overlapped. I believe, was Griffin in both of them? I can't remember. Seamus Power was just outside the top 10 in terms of windy conditions, number 1 in short courses. So lot of similar style players here. Generally a good fit for Port Royal. And then the last thing I really want to do in terms of review from last night, we are on Bermuda greens, so I will add that filter for you, and then going to add Velcro and average. My guess is they're going to be Velcro, but they have had 1 year of average speed greens, so I can't say definitively that they will be Velcro. And I'm actually going to take a big look at this field. I'm going to go back, let's go ahead and do the entirety of the PGA Tour season. I believe that's what we did last night. I want 2021. So September 13th, that is the week of the Fortinet last year. And again, I don't like going back that far, especially since it's going to include last year's tournament. But Sometimes you just need to gather enough rounds to make it stable, to make it suitable. So, your top putters on slow and average Bermuda greens since the beginning of the PGA Tour season last year, dating back to September 13th, 2021. Those players have been Martin Traynor, Denny McCarthy, Aaron Baddeley, Richie Werenski, Sun Kang, Jonathan Bird, Harry Hall, Adam Long, Adam Schenk, Robert Streb, and Chesson Hadley. So that's going to do it in terms of filter review, kind of like a strokes gained page view. We did look at strokes gained approach, so I'm definitely going to be doing that. Bring this data in to July 1st. So your top strokes gained approach players since the John Deere, or July 1st, 2022. Mark Hubbard, Ben Griffin, Samuel No, Callum Tarrant, Adam Schenk, Jonathan Bird, Chesson Hadley, Camilo Villegas, Russell Knox, Stefan Jaeger, Aaron Baddeley, and Cameron Percy. So already you're getting some players that are overlapping quite a bit. Ben Griffin, Adam Schenk was there for putting and now in the strokes gained approach. Callum Tarrant, believe, was in there for the short courses. Might have been the wind, I can't remember. But now in there for strokes gained approach. Chesson Hadley was here for putting, now strokes gained approach. So yeah, some overlap here between some of these players. Now let's get into some good stuff here. I'm going to come into the birdies and bogeys, but before we do that, let's take a look at some of these prior leaderboards. And I did some of this earlier today on Twitch, but it's always going to be good to reacquaint myself, especially with only 3 years. There can be a pattern, but not necessarily. And I think, if I recall, there wasn't much of a pattern between birdies and bogeys. However, there are on other filters. So anyway, last night in Excel, I mentioned that the Eagles gained was a pretty big number. At least in terms of 2022, that looked to be a bit of an outlier. And it didn't really lead to a whole lot of success. Your leader in Eagles, Daniel Chopra, missed the cut. Taylor Pendrith and Brian Gay played well, absolutely. But then your next set missed cut. So it didn't really lead to a whole lot of success there in terms of last year's Bermuda. When we sort on the leaderboard, and this is going to be the top 21, just convenient for ties. The top 21 here, I believe you can see everybody there. Jaeger's getting cut off here by the gentle reminder to subscribe if you haven't, like the video and all that. But in the top 21 players, no one was negative in terms of birdies gained. To be fair, the two players that were negative in terms of bogeys avoided were very close to field average. So very, very similar in terms of success, a slight lean towards birdies gained. You sort on the actual statistic, very, very high amount of correlation here. 9.3 the highest. Bogeys was a 7.6. And again, some more strong correlation, which you would expect. The players that are gaining the most birdies and avoiding the most bogeys are generally rising to the top of the leaderboard. Obvious statements are obvious, but it's not a direct count, say first, second on down. 7.6 in bogeys. So a slight lean to birdies, in my opinion here, especially with nobody being negative in terms of birdies gained and the higher number coming in birdies gained. But that's 1 year. Let's see about 2021. Birdies and bogeys. Again, Eagles, not really that big of a factor, even though we saw that big number in Microsoft Excel last night. So not going to be putting any emphasis on Eagles, even though that outlier was there, and made me question it a little bit, or ponder if I should. Not going to. However, this is the top 20, again, convenient just due to ties. We have nobody negative in terms of bogeys avoided this year. Only 2 were negative in birdies gained. Again, very, very close to field average. The biggest number, 6.8 in terms of birdies gained, 6.2 in terms of bogeys avoided. Roughly the same amount of correlation. I think I would lean slightly stronger towards the bogeys avoided. So now we've had 2 years. Last year was favored to the birdies gained. 2021 was favored to the bogeys avoided, but it's been very, very close. So let's see if 2020 can break that tie, so to say. So I'm going to go ahead and skip the Eagles for the reasons I've mentioned. Birdies gained, 10.3 from Brendan Todd, and very, very strong up here at the top. Bogeys avoided was an 8.5, so at least number-wise, favored the birdies gained. And let's go down here. It looks like there's top 23 due to ties. 2 negative in each. So this is kind of the conclusion I drew earlier today on Twitch, is that they seem pretty darn similar, pretty darn close. If I had to lean something, it would probably be birdies gained, but I'm not particularly confident that it's more important than bogeys avoided. So what we're going to do is we're going to slice and dice this every single way we can. So let's go ahead and start with short courses and see who gets birdies, avoids bogeys, etc., on short courses. So I'm just going to sort on birdies gained. That is my slight favor based on what I've been seeing. So I'm going to sort on birdies gained. That's not the one that I'm definitely going to be considering. Just have to sort by something. Your top birdies gained players since the beginning of 2022 on short courses. Those players have been Seamus Power, Ben Griffin, Austin Eckroat, Eric Van Rooyen, Ryan Armour, Sam Ryder, Robert Garrigus, Stefan Jaeger, Brian Gay, and Cameron Percy. Again, skipping Peter Malnati, he has withdrawn. Okay. Big key here, Seamus Power is number 1 in birdies gained and bogeys avoided. Seems pretty good. If you're number 1 in 2 different things of 2 different categories, or you're considering 2 categories and you're number 1 in both, I'm not sure you can get beat. Put it in the comments if you think I'm mistaken. But I don't think you can get beat in that. That seems pretty good. Ben Griffin, top 10 in both. Ryan Armour, top 5. I mean, to be fair, Ben Griffin's top 5 in both. Ryan Armour's top 5 in both. You've got several players here that are good in birdies, but very bad in bogeys. Say Austin Eckroat, 4th in birdies, but 67th in bogeys. Sam Ryder's decent, 7th in birdies, 29th in bogeys, but some more poor performers in terms of bogeys avoided. So now if we look at the bogeys avoided, Seamus Power, Ryan Armour, Vaughn Taylor, Jonathan Bird, Ben Griffin, Nick Taylor, Adam Shank, Grayson Sigg, David Hearn, and Adam Long. Okay, so there's a look at birdies and bogeys when a course is short. Now let's look at wind. When a round is moderate or windy. Again, just going to sort on birdies first. Your top birdies gained players in the wind since the beginning of 2022 have been Scott Brown, Garrick Higo, EVR, Eric Van Rooyen, Justin Lauer, Michael Kim, Kevin Chappell, Kevin Yu, S.H. Kim, Ben Griffin, Matthias Schmid, and Brian Gay. And really there's only one player here that's top 10 in both birdies and bogeys. It's Kevin Yu, 8th in birdies, 10th in bogeys in the wind. You do get an honorable mention here from Alex Smalley. Okay. Nate Lashley is top 20 in both. Ben Griffin is top 20 in both. So deserving of an honorable mention. Coming down a little bit further here, Thomas Detry, top 20 in both. Will Gordon, also top 20 in both. But there's a look at your top birdies gained players in the wind. Your top bogey avoiders in the wind. Ryan Armour, Adam Long, David Lingworth, Doug Gim, Alex Smalley, Brandon Wu, Bryce Garnett, Cameron Percy, Hinckley Biota, and Kevin Yu. Okay. So there's that info for you. Again, I really don't know how I'm leaning right now. I'm glad I don't have to make the mixed condition model right now because I'm going to have to take some time to think about it. Would be curious to hear your opinion. Put it in the comments or in chat. Reach out, social media, however you prefer to reach out to me, get a hold of me. What do you think? What do you see from the prior leaderboards, the players who have traditionally played well here, all that kind of stuff? Do you think it's birdies? Do you think it's bogeys? Do you think it's short? Do you think it's in the wind? All of the above? None of the above? There's a lot of angles you can take on this one, and we haven't even covered opportunities. So would be curious to hear your all's take. Again, I'm not going to do anything with easy or difficult this week. We have seen, or we saw last night in the historic conditions, if the wind picks up, it can be difficult. If the wind lies down, it's easy. And there looked to be 2 days of calm winds and 2 days of heavy winds. So not really sure which way I'm going to go with that yet. But would like your all's feedback. That would be a fun topic for the community. What do you think, or what do you see? Birdies versus bogeys, wind versus short, etc., etc. So now let's move on to fairways and greens. And this was a big topic last night. Which of the three, fairways, good drives, greens, do we think is going to matter the most? And then I started researching hopped on Twitch early this morning and realized that driving distance might not be so a throwaway statistic this week, because your top 5 or top 6 finishers last year all were positive in terms of driving distance. Now, this doesn't mean driver. It could be that these players are just proficient at hitting their irons longer off the tee, because some of these holes do demand a forced layup. But you see here, sort of on the leaderboard, again, top 21 last year, convenient for ties. Fairways was kind of hit and miss, especially at the very top of the leaderboard. I mean, Vincent Whaley, who's not playing this year, but it doesn't look like he hit a fairway all week, minus 13. Patrick Rogers doesn't look like he hit a fairway all week, minus 11. You had some pretty high numbers in good drives gained, minus 2.7, 5.7, 4.7. Some higher numbers in the negatives in terms of greens, 5.5, 3.5. So kind of all over the place. So the fairways, you did have an 11, but look at this lack of correlation here. You have no player that finished inside the top 10, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball this, perhaps in the top 16 to 18 players in terms of fairways hit last year. None of them finished inside the top 10. Not strong correlation there. Good drives. Again, you had a top 5 from Patrick Rogers, who was good in good drives gained, all of it coming in the greens and regulation, but again, not a whole lot in terms of strong correlation here. I'd say it's very weak correlation in terms of good drives gained. Greens, top number of 9.5. It's the strongest we've seen so far, but again, not a whole lot here. Not a whole lot here. So kind of all over the place last year in terms of what mattered, if anything. So let's check 2021 and see if we get any clearer picture or we're further into the mud. Again, top 7 players here, most of them were above field average in terms of distance. Brian Gay, who is never, ever long, was essentially field average for the entire week, minus 1.1 over 4 rounds. It's essentially field average. You do have some lower numbers here. Ryan Armour's never long. David Hearn, never going to be long. McCarthy's never going to be long. But perhaps distance is a slight thing for players who finish in the upper portion of the leaderboard. Not necessarily the winners, but perhaps it does help in terms of upper leaderboard success. So, top 20 players due to ties in 2021. You've got some massive numbers here in terms of fairways, negative fairways. Wyndham Clark, Ollie, Schneider-Jans, Anirban Lahiri. Zalatoris didn't hit many fairways that week. But we start to see good drives, a lot more success, and a lot less in terms of the negative here in 2021. And you got some big numbers here. 10.8, a couple of 10.8s, 8.8s. Now you had some big numbers. You had a huge number from Russell Knox, but that number fell off pretty darn quickly. 11.5 to essentially 7.5 and on down. Whereas the players that were good or leading in good drives gained at least made cuts to varying degrees of success when they made the cut. But some of these players that led in fairways were not making cuts. So greens, yeah. I mean, you do have Henrik Norlander here, who was positive in all accounts, fairways, good drives, and greens, and in distance. So I imagine either he probably putt atrociously, maybe his wedges weren't good. It's hard to say because we don't get the proximity or the putting data. But something is going on here. But you see big numbers here all throughout the top portion of the leaderboard and the amount of success. So to me, 2021 definitely leaned into the greens. And then 2020, fairways and greens. Again, it not necessarily needed for the winner, but some of these players were up there in terms of distance. Again, the top 7, 5 of them were positive. Most of the upper end of the driving distance made the cut in some regard. Really only had a clunker from Ryan Brim. The others were middling to top 25s and better. So maybe distance is a slight thing here, perhaps. Let's do, again, the top 23. And again, a couple of them are getting cut off, but you can see the majority of what I'm going to be trying to get to here. Fairways, a lot more correlation, but again, these three numbers, 3.9, 3.9, 4.9, those are pretty big numbers there. And look at the good drives. A 0, which, yes, it is technically red. It's under 0. That's why it's highlighted in red, but it's minuscule. It's getting rounded to 0. So you have 3 zeros and a -2 in terms of good drives. And in greens, you have a -1, -1. Lonto was a -4 in terms of greens, but then a 0 as well. I'm starting to think it is greens. So we check the numbers here, 11.1 from Henrik Norlander. Again, but you have another player that was very high in fairways and still missed the cut. Good drives gained. These players at least were making cuts to varying degrees of success. And then greens, a lot of very good success. I mean, your worst finish is Joseph Bramlett, which is a middling finish in a T31. So I think I'm starting to get pretty darn confident that it's going to be greens in regulation and a little bit of distance. So we're going to check with both here. And I went proximity. I wanted fairways and greens. Okay. We'll just keep it on the wind for now. Your top driving distance players in the wind since the beginning of 2022. Those players are Joseph Bramlett, Callum Tarrant, Brandon Matthews, Ryan Brim, Kevin Tway, Kevin Chappell, Alex Smalley, Nick Hardy, Garrick Higo, and Matthias Schmidt. So there's your top driving distance players, but the more important factor is going to be greens. This is what I'm really wanting to see. So your top 10 greens in regulation players, or greens in regulation gaining players since the start of 2022 in moderate and windy conditions. Those players are Adam Long, C.T. Pan, Patrick Rogers, Bryce Garnett, Alex Smalley, Nate Lashley, Aaron Rye, Scott Gostowski, Nick Taylor, and Henrik Norlander. All right. Yep. Patrick Rogers has been popping on quite a few of the models. I imagine he's going to be pretty darn chalky. He was one of the top, I think, 7 or so favorites in terms of sportsbook odds when the odds came out this morning. Your favorite was Denny McCarthy. Last I saw, he was at 14-1, which is a pretty high number for a favorite, to be fair. So if you're not much of an outright wager type person, 14-1 is pretty high on a tournament favorite. You don't see that number very often for the tournament favorite. So if you like Denny McCarthy, that might be worth putting a wager on just out of principle for the high number of a favorite. And then that was for the wind. Let's take a look at short courses. So in that same time frame, since the beginning of 2022, your top greens in regulation gained players on short courses, defined as less than 7,200 yards. Those players are Russell Knox, C.T. Pan, Nick Taylor, Brandon Wu, Eric Van Rooyen, Patrick Rogers, Sean O'Hare, Lucas Glover, Matthias Schwab, and Joseph Bramlett. So you see already some players who are top 10 in both greens when it's short, greens when it's windy. Patrick Rogers, I believe Nick Taylor was there. Matthias Schwab was there. Bramlett, I believe, was number 1. Or maybe that was the distance. I can't remember. But greens when it's short and greens when it's windy going to be a big factor this week. Also important to note here, when a course is short, look, Patrick Rogers, number 4 in driving distance. Bramlett's first in driving distance when a course is short. Seamus Powers, 13th in distance, 12th in greens. And that's an honorable mention for sure. Alex Smalley down here, the same, 6th and 19th, honorable mention. Austin Smotherman, honorable mention, 14th and 19th. Good stuff here in terms of what we're going to be wanting to look at in terms of fairways and greens page view. I am leaning towards greens. Driving distance might be put at 5%. I'm still kind of debating with myself on that. But depending on what the wind finder forecast is, will kind of determine if I'm going to lean towards putting the short course metric on these or the wind metric on these. Or maybe I just put it on the short metric and again just refer you back to here in windy conditions if there seems to be a ton of wind. Still kind of debating on that one as well. But you all have, the community, I say you all, the community has seemed to approve of the quick review of wind factors on a Wednesday night and not factor any of it into the mixed condition model. That at least has seemed to be the consensus so far. Again, from the driving distance, fairways, and greens, I'm going to be looking heavily at greens. Distance will probably be at 5% in some way, shape, or form, but I'm going to be focused heavily on greens and regulation. Let's take a look at some par 3 efficiencies. This is going to be very, very important this week. So last year, par 3s were somewhat important, especially for the top end of the leaderboard. Few numbers here, but you had some players that didn't play them particularly well either. Davis Riley, Brian Gay, McDowell. The highest is a 5.7, but Austin Smotherman missed the cut. Stewart, Michael Kim missed the cut, played these par 3s particularly well. Again, we'll highlight the top 21. 0 to 150. Again, there's only one hole on the scorecard that measures to it. I don't want to put a whole lot of weight into it. Where it's interesting is in the 200 to 225 and 225 and beyond. Let's see. You have pretty big mixed bag here of success and not. Majority of the players, minus Davis Riley here at a 3.8, were at least close to field average in terms of 225 plus. So let's get a look here. 2.8 and a 4.2. Not a whole lot of success here, though. I mean, look, there's 3 missed cuts right there near the top. You know, missed cut from Smotherman. Some decent run there. Interesting. So the bigger number looks to be 225 plus, but not as much high leaderboard success. Okay. 2021. Par 3s. Brian Gay did not play them particularly well at all. But this year there was a lot of correlation. Look at this. Wow. Look at that. Everybody except for Joseph Bramlett was a top, I'm going to be kind, I'll round this to a top 25. Everybody but Joseph Bramlett was basically a top 25. Bramlett was a middling finish. So the par 3s were pretty darn important in 2021. Let's highlight the top 20 due to ties. Oh yeah, look at this. Only one player was negative in terms of 200 to 225. Really, only one player was negative in terms of 225 plus. It was a -2. All these zeros, slight negatives. You got a 3.1. Pretty strong success after the initial 4. 3.14. So the bigger number, again, in 225 plus, but you had some players, you know, a player that missed the cut that finished pretty high. Interesting. 2020. Right now, I'm kind of leaning towards the 200 to 225. Even though there's really only one hole on the scorecard that measures that, you do have 2 par 3s that measure 235, so they could get moved around, I suppose. But look at the par 3s. Brendan Todd was very important for his success. Yeah, he led. It was important in 2020. It was important in 2021. So maybe 2022, last year, Lucas Herbert's year was an outlier. Perhaps. It's hard to say with only 3 years. The number here, 2.4, 4.6. So every year, the higher number has clearly been in the 225 plus, which makes sense because there's double the holes that measure here. You have some decent amount of success here. But I mean, look at this. Look at that. These numbers are much lower than the 225 plus. You do have 151st, but other than that, there's a top 15. What is this? 3, 6. I'll do the top 10 just to make it easy. Top 10 players. You have a 51st and a 35th sorted on the 200 to 225. Let's look when you go to the 225 plus. 3, 5, 7, 10. You got a 41st, a 57th, a 51st. Everything's saying it should be the 200 to 225, which is odd because the bigger number has been the 225 plus. There's more holes measured 225 plus. Interesting. So let's take a look at them all, why don't we? But I am going to remove these filters now. This is just pure on a overarching who's played these well lately type deal. So your top par 3 performers, no filters, just your top par 3 performers since July 1st. Those players have been Austin Cook, Scott Brown, Greg Chalmers, Adam Long, Stephan Jaeger, Jonathan Bird, Chris Stroud, Kevin Yu, Max McGreevy, and Ben On. And if we scan across, let's take a look at the 2 most important ranges here. Austin Cook, top 10 in both. He's really the only one that's even approaching top 10 in both. He's the only one that's really honorable mention, except for maybe saying you'll know, 19th and 14th. So players are either good from 200 to 225 and not at the long, or vice versa. Very interesting to see this. Like Greg Chalmers, 8th and 107th. Jonathan Bird, 1st from 200 to 225, but 85th from 225 plus. Then on the other side, you got Ben On, 24th from 225 plus, but 122nd from 200 to 225. So, I'm kind of torn on this too, kind of like I am with the birdies and bogeys. Do I just put total strokes gained par 3? Do I split out one or both of these? If I do, which one? Or which one's more important? Kind of seeing numbers both directions here. So again, if you feel like it, if you want to chime in your 2 cents, I would appreciate it. Always would love community interaction. What are you thinking? What are you seeing these par 3s? Do you think it's 200 to 225? Do you think it's the 225 plus? Do you think it's just par 3s total? Interested to hear from you all. Let's move to par 4s. This, I know what the answers are going to be. We saw this last night. Oh, shoot. All right, par 4s. There is only one hole that measures 450 to 500 on the scorecard. You've got 6 in this range, 4 in this range, and then 1 here. But you see just the propensity of the importance of par 4s. Your top 21 finishers, none of them were negative in terms of strokes gained par 4. When I sort on strokes gained par 4, look at this just huge amount of correlation. David Hearn was a middling finish. Literally everybody else in the top 20 or so of par 4 performance was a top 20 or top 25. It is just extremely important, especially here at Bermuda. So let's take a look at the individual 2 ranges. You got a 6.7 and a 7.9. Not as high of correlating success here. Roughly the same here. So looks like 400, 450 was the slight winner last year. But, I mean, total par 4s are just very important. Take a look at 2021. Par 4s. You had a 10 from Brian Gay. Goodness gracious, he just devoured the field. I mean, he doubled the next highest person in terms of performance on these short par 4s. So he's a bit of an outlier. So we'll say 7.5. We'll call it 7.5 just to be, just to split the 2 essentially. So 7.5, still an 8.2, this bigger number here. Not the biggest amount of success. You also had a miscut from Josh Teeter here. Let's see, if you sort on, I mean, you can see here all of the green on your screen. Even if I scroll down, all of the green. Pretty darn strong correlation. Like par 4s are going to be so astronomically important. Again, I think I have to give a slight edge to the 400 to 450, which is not what I would have thought. I thought it would be the 350 to 400. Again, all the green, all the time. Biggest number here, 7.5. It was your winner, Brendan Todd. So it is somewhat important to note, like the winner has been the best at this range. That does account for something. 400, 450 is a 5.7. So clearly in 2020, it was more about the 350 to 400s. I mean, that's strong right there. Nothing outside of a top 11 of the guys that, was this top 8 performers? Okay. So clearly par 4 is going to be very, very, very important. Very important. I don't know if I've emphasized it enough. Par 4s are going to be very important. Again, kind of torn on the 350 to 4s and 400 to 450s. But par 4 efficiency. Your top par 4 performers since July 1st. Those players have been S.H. Kim, Thomas Detry, Callum Tarrant, Brandon Wu, Cameron Percy, Chesson Hadley, Rob B. Shelton, Ben Griffin, Denny McCarthy, and Sam Stevens. Again, scanning across, top 20 in both, you got Callum Tarrant, honorable mention, Cameron Percy, 11th and 6th, honorable mention. Nobody is top 10 in both up here. You got Ben Griffin, who's honorable mention, Justin Lauer's honorable mention, But if you sort on them, like nobody is top 10 in both. Villegas, honorable mention, 6th and 15th. I think I said Griffin. I know I said Colin Taryn, Percy. So there you go. There's the look at the 350 to 400s, 400 450s. Thomas Detry, Griffin, Duncan, S.H. Kim, Ben Taylor, Cameron Percy, Denny McCarthy, Sean O'Hare, Mark Hubbard, and Richard S. Johnson. So a lot of these guys are starting to pop on numerous filters here. Cameron Percy has popped a little bit. Denny McCarthy has. Now S.H. Kim has. Ben Griffin's seemingly been there all night in these top 10s. Chesson Hadley has been there in these top 10s. Interesting to see that. But a lot of emphasis in the par 4s this week. Not sure which of the two I'm going to break out, if any. It's clearly not the 450-500. There's only one, and it's clearly the least important range here. But I'm having some trouble deciphering between which of these, like the par 3s, and like birdies versus bogeys, which is more important. Very interesting. Very interesting. Par 5s, just one range. We'll focus on it. Let's come back to 2022. We saw it a little bit in Microsoft Excel, but it's the 500 to 550s. There's only one in this range, and it measures, I think, at 553, so it could very easily come into this one anyway. And these hover right in the 510 range, so it's going to be hard pressed for them to come up to this area here, or in this range. But the par 5s seem to be somewhat important. Top 21, again to ties. Only 2 were negative, and they were at negative 0.3, 3.6, and a 3.1. Just check 2021 just to make sure nothing real screwy is going on. Brian Gay didn't play his par 5 very well at all that year. 4.2, 4.2. Weird. Top 20 due to ties? Okay. More were positive, at least in the 500, 550. I'm starting to get worried that the 550 to 600 was going to be more important. That wouldn't have seemed right at all. And then 2020, highlight the top, just so you all can see top 17. Didn't look like to be all that much. Huh. 4.8, 3.4, more in the 500 to 550. So, with that, your top performers on par 5s from 500 to 550 yards since July 1st. Kyle Westmoreland, Patrick Rogers, Aaron Baddeley, he's withdrawn, Robbie Shelton, Gary Kigo, Nick Hardy, Dylan Wu, C.T. Pan, Austin Smotherman, and Richard S. Johnson. Okay. So there's a look at the metrics in Fantasy National that I am debating between. They are going to be important in some way. How much and what percentage I need to allot to them for the mixed condition model, still working through. We'll definitely be doing more of that tomorrow, and that's what part of building the rookie mixed condition model helps, is to kind of practice, to be honest with you. Kind of practice, see how I feel looking at it, percentages and metrics and whatnot, coming to when I come to the full field mixed condition model. Let me bring up this one first. So we went through this a little bit last night, but what I have done, I've highlighted some possible outliers. Again, I say possible, like this one pretty clearly seems to be an outlier. The fairways the other 2 years were not nearly this number, so I'll remove that. Greens, the other 2 years were somewhat more important, so I've highlighted anything that could be a potential outlier. And let's get a feel for where these numbers and percentages are after I remove those. So, again, driving distance. I mentioned it last night that I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, but then you looked at the leaderboard earlier in the show. Some of the top players on are in the success. The top 5s, the top 10s were positive in driving distance. Might be a little bit of a factor, even though the course is so short. Perhaps your propensity with long irons and woods, like 3 woods, 5 woods, could be a factor here. Fairways, you see, we removed that outlier. It becomes extremely less important. Extremely less important. Good drives actually jump, but I'm still pretty much focused on the greens. We saw that through the 3 leaderboards. I'm pretty sold that it's going to be the greens in regulation. Here, data-wise, it's saying that the bogeys are more important compared to the average full field course than the birdies. Okay, I still think I'm leaning birdies, but I could be convinced either way. I could be convinced to put 5% on both just to see. So again, this is the one that I'm most stuck on. Is these two right here. We looked at this last night as well. The par 3s, 22% more important now, removing that potential outlier. These two are going to be very, very big outliers because you see not every course that we have data for even has par 3s of those ranges. Most courses don't have a 0 to 150 par 3. Some courses don't have a 225 plus par 3. So a little harder to gauge there. This is saying that it is exactly course average in terms of 200 to 225. So it's clearly going to be these two. I think it's going to be strokes gained par 3, however, that I end up using in the mixed condition model. Probably. If I had to lean one way or the other, I would go 225 plus. But again, I'm not convinced of it. That is what I am thinking on a Monday night. And it could change. It could change. It could change in 5 minutes. Par 4s. 11% more important. This number is very, very big. Not every course has a par 4 that measures this short. But it is a distinct feature here at Port Royal. So I'm pretty sure we're going to want to look at this in some regard, whether that's an extra 5%, an extra 10%, I don't know. These are going to be important as well, so we probably need to break these out as well. We're definitely not going to be looking solely at this. This is going to be just grouped in with the strokes gained par 4. But I am going to split both of these out. I'm still debating a little bit on percentages. I want to lean 350 to 400 because there's more holes in that regard, and it's a unique feature here at Port Royal. But the numbers say that the 400 to 450 was actually a little bit more important. So, or at least the numbers in terms of the leaderboard. But here it's not showing it. So perhaps it is just straight 350 to 400. You can see just the amount of weight or lack thereof that the one par 4 450 500 carries or not. 225 plus looks like it's pretty darn heavy once you remove that potential outlier. So perhaps I need to focus on the 225 plus and strokes gained par 3. Very interesting. Then finally, while I'm here, we'll take a look at par 5s, but again, it's all in the 500 to 550s, excuse me. And we come to the valuation page. Par 5s really aren't that important. We saw that in the leaderboard, but that range is compared to the average full field course. So there's that for you. Now let's come over to the early look file. Let's start sorting on some of these metrics that we know are going to be a factor. Let's start with greens and regulation. Be a good one to start on. So I'm not going to filter out anybody who has only played it once. I'm just going to kind of just take a look here. So, your top players that have played on Port Royal in the Bermuda Championship. Russell Knox leads in greens, and he's played it 3 times and played it very, very well, so that's very promising. Tyler Duncan 1 time, Scott Piercy. There's Henrik Norlander again. We mentioned him, how odd he seemed to be since he was hitting greens at a very high clip. I mean, fairways and all that. So what's going on with Henrik Norlander here? So you can see here the birdies, a little bit negative. The par 3s, positive. Par 4s are okay. Par 5s are only at a -1. Henrik Norlander might be somebody to kind of look at. The numbers say that he is underperformed how well he should have played here. Now, that's not taking into consideration any putting. Perhaps he's just putt awful here. That is a distinct possibility. But by the numbers we have gathered, or we're able to gather, it says that he is severely underperformed. So maybe take a look at Henrik Norlander. Smalley played well in his 1 year. There's Kramer Hickok, who's played very well here. He's been adept at hitting greens. McCarthy the same. Rogers the same. Fabian Gomez has not played particularly well. He's missed 2 of the 3 cuts, but he has at least been hitting greens. What else is going on here? Yep. It's off screen, but he has not played the par 4s particularly well. Okay, so there's a look at your top green and regulation game players. Let's sort on... I'm going to sort on birdies. Again, we'll just kind of take a casual look across birdies and bogeys. Actually, I'm just going to ignore eagles as well. So if we sort on birdies and kind of take a look here, like Brian Gay is much more into the birdies. He's a former champion. David Hearn, much more into the birdies. McCarthy, pretty even, but still more so into the birdies. Russell Knox birdies. Ryan Armour birdies. So it looks like it's a pretty clear birdies gained, at least by players that have played it often and played it well. Kramer Hickok has been more bogey oriented. That's the first one that's played it multiple times and been higher in the bogeys avoided. Trahan birdies. Bramlett birdies. Lebiota bogeys. I'm thinking it's birdies. I think it might be birdies, thanks to sorting on this and kind of looking at the individual players who have played the Bermuda Championship. In fact, why don't I just sort this on finish and take a look again. This will include players that have played it only once. But let's take a look at anyone who has let's say an average of a top 40. Yeah, let's do an average of top 40. Just get quite a bit here. So this is, 34 players? 34 players. They could have played it once, twice, or all 3 years. Your average in terms of birdies gained here is a 1.8. And really, other than Ben Taylor, who is down here, I need to scroll for you. Other than Ben Taylor, most everybody has been fairly close to field average. Ben Taylor was a -3. You got Bryce Garnett's a -1.2. But really, those two are the really, really high numbers. Whereas in the bogeys avoided, going down to that same group of 34, you've got an average of a 2.3, so higher than the birdies in terms of an average, but it's just much more consistent. Yeah, look at this. You got much more consistency in terms of bogeys avoided. So you got a negative here from Hadley. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. The rest are off the screen for you. 5, 6, 7. So you have 7 players that are negative in birdies gained versus bogeys avoided. You have 1, two. Two players negative in terms of bogeys avoided. I think I need to rescind my answer. I think it might be bogeys avoided. I think it might be bogeys avoided. It's close. They're both going to be important. But perhaps it's bogeys avoided. I think I'm sold. Sold to the man in the blue shirt today. Bogeys avoided. Let's look at par threes. I'm going to look at total par threes and just kind of scan across to see who has played 225 and such well. So Harry Higgs, Thomas Detry his 1 year. There's Ben Taylor. He's played the long par threes well. Kramer Hickok. There's Brian Stewart. He has not played this event very well at all. He's missed the cut 2 of the 3 times, but he's played the par threes well. And that's why he's been bad at the 4s and bad at the 5s. It's not a very good combination. Jonathan Bird has played them well. Again, let's just kind of take an eyeball here. There's a 0.7 down to McCarthy. It's a 1.3. So 225 plus seems to be garnering more weight of the players who have played the par threes the best. If we sort on finish, we're a little bit over time. I apologize, but the math nerd has gone full math nerd. He's in the groove. Par threes. This is by average finish. So again, that same group, the average of the top 40s. 34 players. This is an average of a 0.3. 0.5. So not much better, but still a little higher than the 225 plus, but it's close. But to round this out very quickly, like you can see, just the par fours. God, my goodness. My goodness. Anybody who has averaged a 40th place finish or better has averaged 4.3 strokes gained par 4. That's a big number. That same group, you've got a 2.0 and a 1.8. So yeah, slight lean to 350 to 400. Makes sense. And then the par 5s do seem to kind of be mitigated in importance, which makes sense. There's only 3 here at Port Royal. Generally, everybody's getting birdies on 2 of the 3. It's only an average of a 0.7. So, yeah. Last thing I want to do, and I made sure I remembered tonight, let's take a look at my mixed condition model from last year's Bermuda Championship. So right off the bat, you can see fairly middling up top with a lot of miscuts. So at least up in the upper portion of my mixed condition model, at least the rankings wise, it did not perform very well at all. Your winner, Lucas Herbert, was very, very far down here. Strokes gained approach at 20% seems quite high. Don't think it's going to be at 20%. I did have 15% in Bermuda putting. I did not have any slow or average filter on it. I just put regular Bermuda. That's probably a mistake. I probably need to put slow and average, or Velcro and average. But Lucas Herbert does putt well on Bermuda. So not terribly off there, I don't think. Par 3s, I put a lot of weight. Par 4s, I put a lot of weight. I need to up this percentage quite a bit. I'm going to be hammering the par 4s this week. And he just played them particularly well last year, so there was no way to expect Lucas Herbert to have won in regards to his par 4 performance. He just played them well last week. It happens. There's 10% I'm getting back for sure, although Lucas Herbert did perform well on short courses. There's 10% I'm getting back because I'm not doing strokes gained total. There's another 5% I'm getting back for windy. But you can see Lucas Herbert did match very strong in those considerations. So that is something I was on the right track there. I did put 5% in approach windy. I can understand why. It makes some sense. Around the green seems like a strong metric. I don't know if I'm going to have 10%. And then over here, I have some metrics that I was considering as tiebreakers, but I didn't put any weight into them in terms of rankings. Scrambling 225 plus, which we're going to be looking at as well, and then 350 to 400 we'll be looking at as well. So definitely going to be grabbing or getting some percentage back from the approach. 20% is way too high. Getting 10% back here, getting 5% back here. So my guess is I'll have about 25% to play with, maybe 30, because I'm not going to put any strokes gained approach in the wind, although I understand why I was thinking that. Par 5s were of little importance, and I was on that train again I'm on that train again this year, that same line of thinking as last year. But it is interesting to see that Lucas Herbert, your winner, was very good on short courses and very good in the wind, and it matched last year. So we might take a look at that tomorrow on Twitch. Sort on these two statistics and see what was going on there. But that is going to do it for the Data Dive show for the Bermuda Championship. I'll bring you back to the prior course performance, if you will, or the early look file. But thank you for tuning in and watching and listening, supporting the channel. Always appreciate it. Again, a big shout out to the big winners from the community this weekend. James in his showdown contest from Friday. Joanne cashing 80% of her lineups. That's astronomical. Congratulations to you both. And thanks for letting me know. It really does make my weekend to hear when viewers and members of the community have success. It really does make my weekend. So thanks for reaching out and telling me. But again, thanks for the support. I always appreciate it. I will be live tomorrow on Twitch, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, doing some rookie rankings, prepping my mixed condition model, all of that good stuff. So I hope you consider stopping by. For all of the wagers that you've made so far this week for the Bermuda Championship, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Bermuda Championship, until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.